This workshop is very much, although the slide is there, Richard is not going to do the lecture again. This is not a didactic lecture session, it's a workshop. It's you doing the work rather than us, and use the facilities that are here. The key strategic question in the workshop was, are you wondering how to achieve outstanding in your next Ofsted? And clearly the focus is teaching and learning. My name is Richard Dimbleby. Some of you may know me. I'm here as an ELSIS consultant. I'm a former college principal. In fact, a long time ago, we were both principals in Somerset. Richard in Yeovil and me in Strode in Street, just up the road. Although we competed, we got on well as well.
We did.
And I was then Bournemouth and Poole principal for a number of years doing consultancy. It's over to you. We can carry on talking. As principals, we can talk, but it's not our chance to talk. It's over to you, really, to ask questions. Anything you want to explore. I'm not sure that we haven't got mics and things, so you have to shout.
One of the things that struck me in the teaching and learning thing is both very practical stuff.
I don't think we do have mic. Oh, we do have a mic.
We do have a mic. There's a mic coming.
Thank you.
From your right.
Thank you very much.
I'll shout.
No, I think he's bringing it up.
As he pressed, there's probably a thing on the mic as well, isn't there?
Shout.
Yeah, I'll shout. It's all very practical stuff, but my observation in our college over the last few years with a bit of focus on teaching and learning has been more a psychological change, moving from kids being insisted on being taught to wanting to learn. And I think that move has made quite a difference in attitude in college. But it's a psychological thing rather than a mechanism thing. I just wonder if you had any views on that. But getting the kids to want to learn, all the techniques that you're talking about are applicable to that, obviously. But there's a subtle change happens in people when they want to learn rather than just being there to be taught.
Yeah, first of all, I would agree it's about culture and climate. I think I said that earlier. I think creating you can't hear me now. It's too. Can you hear me now? Aha. Right, start again. Sorry about that.
Booming now.
First of all, I agree it's about culture and climate. I think that is really important. I think the governors, together with the principal, have a key role, don't they, in establishing the college's culture and climate over a period of time. I would agree with you that if students want to learn rather than they have to go there to be taught, that is a very welcome development. It may not apply to every single student, but that's the sort of culture. That's why I would think learner voice is very important, because you create a culture in which the teaching staff see that listening to and engaging with students is a very important part. They're not white sheets of paper to be put in front of you so that the teacher can write on them. It's much more of an active process. So I would agree with all that. And I think governors encouraging that in any way you can is a really good thing. But I also think governors need to measure the effectiveness of that, because you could do all that and it could do all nice and the students could like it, and then you'll find out loads of them aren't passing or they're dropping out. So for me, the dual role of governors, one is to help foster that culture and climate, and that's aided by having student and staff governors in the room, so they go back and can say what the governors are focusing on. But the governors have to focus on the effectiveness, and I think there is a data issue there, and lots of college, as somebody joked when we came in, about the FE system. There's a hell of a lot of data in FE, so you have to decide fairly early on exactly what data it is you as governors want to see, and you need to keep asking for it, really. And my experience, I was just talking to a chap here in the front row who's got more experience than me, Dennis. A lot of colleges, that get into difficulty, data is often at the heart of it, really. So the governors need to be able to think and reflect and be ever so clear about what data it is. It may not be the same data that the senior management team are looking at exactly. It may be a synthesis of that. But certainly my Quality and Standards Committee have been extremely clear. I mean, we've helped, I think, to educate and develop them, but they've been very clear about what data they want. We have a governance dashboard. And so as well as that, which clearly those senior management teams, but it's a board that they've been involved in developing. And on that governance dashboard, there are both quality, teaching and learning indicators, as well as the usual ones about finance. And their ownership of that dialogue, the Quality and Standards Committee having influenced the development of that data to what they want to monitor the effectiveness of the teaching and learning, for me, is equally important with fostering a culture and climate as you describe. I hope that's somehow.
Should we stay with the data theme for a moment or two? Clearly, most boards will look at, and have looked at for some years, success data, attendance, enrolment, attendance, retention, achievement. You might also look at an overview of teaching and learning observations. Is there other data that you now feel, if we're really saying teaching and learning is a prime focus, just as a side, there are only two prime focuses for boards, aren't there? One is the educational character. I mean, all that we're talking about today is not new. You are responsible as governors, we are responsible as governors for the educational character. What we do, how we do it, why we do it, who we do it for, and for the solvency, the sustainability of the college. Those two are critical. But data, are there issues around data that you feel as governors you already have all you need to monitor it? Are there more things you feel you will need and do need now? We've got several questions. Will you start down here, and then I'll come back to you.
I think that we've been talking about the relationship between governors and data, but there are two things that strike me as very important. It is getting the staff to use the data for quality purposes, and being able to audit their use of data and their management of that data, because that relieves some of the minutiae of the task of the governing body. And the second thing is, I think that you're not going to get anywhere until you've got your staff owning a data set which actually helps them do their job rather than helps management do its job. So it's encouraging a perception of why the data exists and how it is used and who has access for it. And the third corollary of that, I think, is that you have to accept that if you've got a good data set, that can be very critical of management, and you've got to take it on the chin as well as them.
Thank you. Should we come back to people over here wanted to come in, and perhaps Richard will respond to that. Owning data clearly is a critical issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should we let Richard come in?
Just the point I want to make.
Do you want to introduce yourself and say
sorry, I'm Carol Drury-Clark and also Senior Manager at Kendal College. I'm actually sitting next to my former lead inspector, who was our friend a couple of years ago, probably isn't anymore. I think that from the data point of view, exactly what you've been saying about staff and managers owning data is very, very important. And I think we're trying to get to the point with our dashboard delivery of having different levels of data. So there'll be course data, there's management data, and there's governance data. But our governors are starting to ask for value-added data. How can we assure our governors that our students are getting the best deal in college? And we're trying to find our ways at the moment as a management team of providing them with sufficient value-added data that shows the student experience and where, obviously, the destination data, but the whole package of stuff that's away from the pure success rates. Success rates are brilliant in that respect, but what else are our students getting out of the college experience? And that's quite a hard one to do.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman behind you, I think, wanted to come in.
Yeah, Ian Gilmore, Shrewsbury College. I'm in a situation where I'm a brand new chair of governors, and I also have a brand new principal. That's good news and bad news. But generally speaking, the first problem we're trying to address is looking at the data is to try and ensure that actually what we see is what the management sees, and not, and the data provided to governors haven't had any spin put on it, if I can be quite blunt. So, so one of the sort of fundamental problems we have is how do you actually ensure that the governors see the right data at the right time, given that none of our governors, with one exception, have any educational background.
Thank you. I think there was, then gentleman at the back, and then perhaps you come in.
Hi, Zach Thompson, student governor at Burton and South Derbyshire College. Is this on all right? Can everybody hear me?
We've missed the name of the college.
Burton and South Derbyshire College.
Thank you.
One of my other roles within the college is I'm actually the Students' Union president there, and what we see works quite well is, as part of the standards committee, kind of focusing on stuff like the retention and success, and really taking that back to the students and translating that data to say how do you feel, kind of what's your experience of college been so far, and how do you feel we could improve on this, and basically feeding that from the students back to governors and saying this is what the students feel. How can we do this in terms of governance data, and then going back to the students as well and saying how can we change this on a day-to-day scale, and then how will this then see improvements in the data and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman at the back, and gentleman with the jumper, I think, first of all, and then...
Charles Reynolds, clerk at Lowestoft College. One of the things that's pleased me about the change in the Common Inspection Framework, I think if I've got it right, is that Ofsted at last have recognised that achievement for many students isn't measured in terms of success, it's measured in other ways. And I think that one of the pieces of information that governors do need to be aware of is exactly, or as near as you can get it, what are your students coming to your college with? At what level are they coming to your college? Do you know actually what your teaching staff are having to work with from the very start of their journey through college? Because, as I say, for many students, that value added, that movement to some sort of success could actually be about making them employable. It might not actually be about achieving a qualification, an A-level, a GCSE. And I think that's an important part of understanding how well your students are learning.
Okay, I've got several more people, but maybe Richard, do you want to pick up one or two of those themes?
I'll try two or three of them if I could. I've tried to be pretty practical today and give it from a principal's point of view. I'm also a commissioner on Frank McLaughlin's commission that's been referred to several times, the Commission for Adult and Vocational Teaching and Learning, and our report's going to be published a week on Monday, and I hope that's going to give some thought to the bigger issues, such as, is it an inspection tool like Ofsted the right way to improve quality in vocational education teaching, and so on. But in my job, Ofsted is still king at the minute, or queen. It still makes or breaks reputations of colleges. And so in my day job, it is a really important focus of what I do. Even when I'm over in India with Asha, it's something I can't keep out of my mind. So every time Michael Wilshaw unhelpfully talks about Catford and whatever in China, it kind of worries me. So it is an important part of my mind. Secondly, we ran some conferences after the no notice. The part of Exeter College everybody was most interested in was MIS. Everybody who came to the college was most interested in MIS. So data must be a big issue in the sector still. When we ran a day, we ran 2 days. I understand from ELSIS, we ran the best attended ELSIS conference last year in a hotel in Exeter. And when we asked them at the end, what did they want to know more about, what was the best session, overwhelmingly it was MIS. I completely agree with some of the things that have been said. For me, there are probably 4 audiences for MIS, and I think the challenge with information is you can't get all the data right suddenly. So if the data isn't right, it isn't all going to be right for the next board meeting. This is quite the journey because a lot of data in FE, a lot of learners in FE, and it takes some time to improve. But for me, we have students, teachers, management and governors as 4 separate audiences. And while some of the data is relevant across the board, we've worked really hard on tailoring our data for our teachers. So our teachers have direct access to a lot of data. We employ our own programmers in-house. We develop our own systems. Clearly, we have an MIS system underpinning, we have a Capita system underpinning it. But the way we present data to our staff is customised in-house, and it is customised to those 4 audiences. And the last audience we've got to is students, where we're trying to get students to monitor their own data more and more. And certainly where I want to end up is where there are stations around the college where students can literally access at the press of a button lots and lots of their own data as well. I think it's really important, as I said earlier, that governors keep asking for the data that they think would help them. The reason I've gone on about a Quality and Standards Committee is I think some of this is a dialogue between management and governors. And I find my main board has 20 governors, plus some seniors. It's less easy to have a dialogue of the right kind in that audience, because there are other things for us to discuss, like the accounts and the property strategy and whatever. Where Quality and Standards has worked really well for us is having half a dozen governors in the room with management, really discussing this quite intensely for 2 hours, and then improvements tend to follow. So I think for this sort of work, the board is less effective in some ways. It needs to be discussed, but if you're really going to move things on and improve it, it's done in a smaller group of governors, I think, much more effectively. If the data's being spun, as somebody said, then you just need to get an audit, really. I'm afraid there's a list of firms, as long as you are, will send you an email and tell you how much they'll charge you, and people better informed than me could probably tell you the best people to use. There's an industry in checking your data and testing it and giving you ideas, but if you are a governor and you genuinely are not confident in the data, you ought to commission an audit. You just definitely ought to, and otherwise you're going to wake up one day and find the college has got a serious problem. And I just agree with what was said about owning data, and I couldn't agree more with the first speaker who said that sometimes the data will uncover uncomfortable things for management, but management's sometimes about feeling uncomfortable. It's not just feeling good because you're in management. And so sometimes it does throw up data that makes you think, oh my God, I didn't know about it. But at least you now know about it, and you have to spin it back positively and get moving on putting it right. But even that, my data occasionally throws things up that makes me or some of my colleagues occasionally uncomfortable. But if you can't live with the uncomfortable data, you shouldn't be doing my sort of job, really.
Gentleman in front of the pillar here. I
Yeah,
think so.
okay. Chris Duckling, and I'm Vice Chair of the Governors at Sussex Downs College, and I'm also Chair of the Curriculum and Standards Committee. A couple of comments or observations on data for governors. One is be very careful what you ask for. Management is quite capable of producing 50-odd pages of data for you, and you then have to try and sort out the information from it. So be very careful.
Okay.
When you do go, and the second observation, when you do go down that step, be extremely careful of aggregated data, because, and we got caught out on this as governors at our Ofsted, and actually management as well, by looking at good aggregated data that underneath had some spiky problems in it. And we've got around this by setting boundaries. So essentially what governors want to know is when data falls outside of upper or lower boundaries. And it's important to have uppers as well. So if something's doing extremely well, you want to know about it, not just the bad things. So I absolutely agree, data is absolutely critical, but management can flood you with it. And you've just got to work out exactly what you want.
Nicole at the back, and then we've got 2 ladies here, and then John.
I would like to ask Mr. Atkins, how do you provide to your governors the latest data about the change in employment needs in your community? I mean, this is one data that I always find very difficult to get, partly because the city of Bath that I come from is changing enormously in the type of jobs that it attracts. And I want to make sure as a governor that we produce the right courses for the new jobs which are being created. And this seems to be difficult. Should it be difficult to get? And how do you get it?
Thank you. 2 ladies here, and then John there, and then we're moving away a little bit from MIS data into other themes, perhaps.
Val Ainsworth from Herefordshire College of Technology.
Can you all hear?
Val Ainsworth, Chair of the Governors of Herefordshire College of Technology. I think I might be going back to basics here, so please forgive me, but I want to say this. I think that in terms of the power of governors to interrogate data, you have to look at the quality of the governors. And also that this is something which can be addressed in several ways, of course. Training implications for governors are here, but equally, governors being put into situations where they haven't got the edge, and therefore they recognise that they need to get up to speed. It's a challenge for governors to, for example, in my case, audit, help, but it makes you on edge. It makes you want to learn more about it. So I think that there is an issue around skill sets, around the composition of all committees, not just quality and standards, and also the training implications thereof.
Thank you. Lady here.
Hi, Jo Wheel from West Herts College. I'm the Vice Chair there. It was really a very similar point. I think the concern for governors is always understanding what you don't know. And I was going to raise the point about the committee and whether you felt that there should be a standards and quality committee. And you actually answered that question in your last set of comments. But as a college, we don't do that, and the whole board consider the data, which I believe to be good and to be giving me what I want. But it's really, how do you know if you're not getting something that you should be getting, that perhaps another college is getting? Because you need the people on the board who perhaps realise that something is missing. And I think the job of a governor is often working out what you haven't got.
Okay, thank you. John, and then we'll respond. In work I do with governors, that's a very common theme. You know, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, and that quote does apply, doesn't it? And asking the right questions, getting underneath and behind data. And many governors feel confident doing that in finance and accounts and audit, less confident in teaching and learning and student experience. Can we let John?
John Short. I'm Chair of Governors at York College, but I'm also on the Governors' Council. And interestingly, the question about data, Richard has put together a very good governance, and some others, a very good governance library which is online. And I was just wondering, and I don't know whether it's there, whether there is anything there, Richard, in terms of reports, you know, template-type reports, good best practice reports. But if it's not, would people think that was a good idea to go on there?
Thank you. Shall I quickly respond, then pass over to Richard? I was going to give a plug for the Governance Resource Library. If you haven't looked at it, on the AOC website, we are developing, it is in the early stages, a resource for governors alongside the Excellence Gateway, using Excellence Gateway. And there is a topic area there on teaching, learning and assessment, where again we're introducing some of these issues and some of the questions governors might ask. But I think the data issue that John's talking about isn't specifically there yet. And I've just been doing some work on peer review with Elsis, a colleague from Elsis doing that as well. And two things have emerged from that peer review. One is questioning, you know, asking the right questions, getting behind data. Another one, as Richard said, governance dashboards. You know, what is the data that governors really need on the different areas of importance to understand, you know, in a timely way, how the college is performing. So I think we do need to pick this up and perhaps do some good practice case studies. And that governance library is rooted in case studies. So I appeal for any of you who think you've got some interesting practice to share. That's what we want this library to be, a resource for governance, good practice and governance examples to come forward. Richard, do you want to...
I'll only end by supporting what John and Richard have said. I think that the role of governors is clearly becoming much more important in the age of more freedoms and less bureaucracy. I think the government's recognising that. I think the AOC Governors' Council will become more prominent, and resources such as the one Richard's put together are going to be really important to help governing bodies address some of these issues. I had about 3 responses to the questions. I totally agree with recruitment and selection of governors. So my comments on that would be succession planning is really important. So for me, it's really important for boards to have a succession, to be thinking about succession planning. So a governance and search committee that meets pretty regularly, thinks about who chairs committees, who chairs the board, and thinks about a succession plan. Always worries me when people say, I've been in this particular role on a governing body for, a very long time. So I think that's important. And then when you're doing the skill set, I'm sure you all do, data for me would be right up there with accountancy or property or a local head teacher. And people who are comfortable with data come from a wide range of backgrounds. I ended up, as I told you, with a chief weather forecaster. That was clearly not in my mind. What I learned from that was that by having someone who can analyse data quickly and enjoys doing it, the whole board have benefited. And they'll all say, we don't like doing that, but Alan does. And what that does is it provokes awkward questions for me and my team occasionally, but I think it's proven to be healthy. In terms of aggregated data, I totally agree, it can be misleading. And the boundaries I understand are a really good one. The only other thing my governors do is sample some of our internal quality assurance. So we have a system, loads of colleges have something similar. We call ours quality and resources review days. So once a term, I devote 3 days to seeing each head of faculty and their deputy. And we, with my deputy and with a panel of their peers, normally a couple of their peers on the group, and we go right through the faculty. So we go through all the data, and we go through learner feedback, and we go through the whole thing, really, quality and resources, but an hour and a half to 2 hours per faculty. Now, members of the Quality and Standards Committee sit in on those. Not the whole thing. I encourage them to ask questions. They don't get into the detail of, can I now come along and see all the teaching? But what they do see is that the management practices and systems are robust, that the way we do things around here is robust, that I'm quite happy to challenge as well as support and celebrate success, and my colleagues are, and that by the time things get to the Quality and Standards Committee, they have been pretty robustly challenged. And I think over time that's given my governors more confidence and more security. I think aggregated data presented in a particular way, I totally agree, can be misleading. And I think you need to be able to put your finger into the pie occasionally to test it. And there must be lots of different ways, some much better than I've thought of, or my governors have, but they find that sitting in once a term, they'll come normally half a day or a day and see 3 or 4 faculties. And it's the process as much as the specific issues that affect construction or maths and science. It's as much the process and checking that the data's robust, that the local management support, understand, use that data, that it's what they want. They see all that just by sampling it, and they don't need to do it all themselves. So that would probably be my final comment. I think my microphone's cutting off as well.
Yes?
Yes, it seems to be working. I'm Chris Painter. I'm Chair of Governors at King Edward's Sixth Form College in Stourbridge. And in fact, this is my first year as Chair of Governors. And there are 2 issues that have been exercising me, which I think are relevant to the discussion we're having at the moment. The first one is the extent to which we seem to be dependent on management for our data and information, and the limited contact there seems to have been previously with other stakeholders, including with staff within the college, so that at least there's the opportunity to hear some alternative perspective on performance and the explanations for performance, what's going well and what's not going so well. Yet this clearly can be a delicate issue, because if you go the wrong side of a particular boundary, then as governors you're likely to be accused of trespassing onto sort of operational matters rather than policy and strategic matters. But it seems to me there is an issue there about how governors can be more widely informed, and I say not depend exclusively on the management perspective. Be interested to hear what kind of processes and mechanisms are used to enable governors to develop that wider understanding and appreciation of what's going on. The second issue, the mention of the Quality and Standards Committee, and yes, we have such a committee, And at the moment, as well as being chair of governors, I'm chair of that committee, not for much longer, I hope. And in fact, I chaired a meeting of quality and standards yesterday evening, very good meeting, 2 hours just over, full of all kinds of robust data, good dialogue between management and the governors on the committee. But for the first time this November, our self-assessment report, rather than being discussed in the Quality and Standards Committee, we had it discussed at the full board, because the view being that really now, with the increasing emphasis on learning, teaching and assessment, and the increasingly important role of governors in that connection, that there should be more collective ownership of these issues. Yet, I have to say, and this is one of the things we discussed at Quality and Standards yesterday, we were disappointed at the quality of debate on these learning, teaching and assessment issues at board level, as distinct from quality and standards. So, as chair of governors, one of the challenges I see is developing this greater sense of cohesion and collective ownership on the part of governors, including of issues relating to learning, teaching and assessment. Sorry if I went on too long.
Thank you. That's prompted a few thoughts in my mind. I'm Keith Brown, Chair of the College of Haringey Enfield in North East London. Our principal site's in Tottenham, you might know that better. I spent many years involved with the college trying to actually get some facts out of the various figures that come along. And I think this is a problem generally in society. I'd love to ask this audience, for example, how many of you actually have a qualification of some sort in statistics as opposed to maths? Because actually statistics is quite a very serious subject, and if you've done statistics, you'll understand the problems of collecting statistics, problems of recording them, and then the key issue is how do you get any useful information out of those figures that you are getting? Because it's very rare to find a situation where the numbers will tell you what you need to know. What you often need is some qualitative information to go alongside that quantitative information to actually get a proper understanding of what is there. I've got the reverse experience of a lot of people here, because we actually removed our standards committee for the same reasons that other people are kind of supporting and creating one. We weren't getting sufficient information or sufficient quality debate coming back to the whole governing body from a standards committee, because very often we found that they were digging into pointless detail about certain things and never actually getting the information into a position for the governing body as a whole to really understand better and to be informed and have that kind of quality debate at the governing level. And you can't do that unless you've got a certain drip feed of information about that issue. So we removed the standards committee and introduced key performance indicators. And in keeping with some of the discussion, what figures do you get to look at the key performance indicators in teaching and learning? And pretty much almost every meeting, we change the information that we want to get, because everything we set on doesn't quite get to where we want to know. But on the other hand, it's almost like a journey, because we are better informed at every stage, and every stage we ask for more information. I think it's a little bit better informed. But the key is, what is really going on? Don't confuse facts from figures.
Thank you. Gentleman here.
I'm Mike Dinsdale, and I'm an independent governor with Tameside College, so quite local. Could I ask a slightly different question? It's my understanding under the new Common Inspection Framework that there is a requirement for inspectors to actually speak with governors. Is that the case? Was that your experience? And what's involved? I think we'd like to know.
Okay, thank you. We'll pick up these and then come back to you, John, in a moment.
If I start with that one factually, my experience in talking to colleges that have been done this term, I think if things are going reasonably well, they will always want to meet with a small number of governors. I think if things are going reasonably well, it's likely to be a small number of governors. So usually the chair, if they're not available or away, it would be the vice chair. I think with us, they met with 4 governors, chair, vice chair, chair of quality and standards, one other. Things were clearly going well. I think they only had 1 meeting with them. I would say there was, and that meeting focused very much on the governors and teaching and learning. So a different feel to 4 or 5 years earlier, really, where they met with them for a bit longer and asked a wider range of issues. So that was my experience. So I think they always will want to meet with governors. I think it will never be the whole board. In my experience, it won't be the whole board. It'll only be a small group of governors. And if things are going reasonably well during the inspection, I don't think it'll be a terribly long meeting. We always run a thing. We run a thing regularly called, what do we call it? Most awkward questions or something. My deputy runs it. Every governor's residential, we have a short session. So think of the most awkward questions, or I think the management do beforehand, and then we ask groups of governors. So what are the most awkward questions you could possibly be asked about the college? And then it kind of rehearses everybody a bit. At least everybody at least they stop and think then. Going back to the other things, I only had two comments, I think. One would, you're a terribly nice group. I wish you were all on my governing body. I think some of you are not awkward enough. You know, I would just keep asking. You know, you appraise your principal and other senior post holders. You have a board. I would just keep asking. This is not some secret garden. You know, if my board really wants them in, then the chair probably gang up with a couple of other, and they would, you know, unfortunately, we haven't been there for, we're not there, but they're not afraid to ask me, and I'm not afraid to answer. I think if you really need to get to the root of the data and the qualities, and not be blinded by it's all too complicated for governors, or there's far too much data, or it's all far too difficult. In my view, it's not too difficult, and if my governors were here, they'd say that. My other point would be that the governors are a team. I was thinking of the city we're in, and like Manchester United, you kind of need different players, don't you? Like you need a goalkeeper, and you need a striker, and you need midfield. So the whole board won't necessarily be brilliant at quality and standards. I don't think that matters. I mean, I've got somebody who happens to be an auditor who's brilliant at all that stuff, and he isn't that good at quality. I don't think it matters. I think the team has to play together. I would sit down in governance and search committee, or before that with your principal and clerk, and think, who are our top governors? Because every governing body's got 3, 4, 5, 6 of you, highest performing governors. How many of them are on quality and standards? My view is you need 2 or 3 of them on quality and standards. If you send a signal that all the serious governors are on business F&GP, you've sent a big signal. So that would be the first thing, is that I would make sure you had some of your biggest hitters on quality and standards. And the second thing I'd say is be awkward. You know, we are all accountable to our boards, and if you really think either the data isn't right, or it's too aggregated, or it's all, you're being told it's all far too complicated for governors, you know, to get involved in this and pat it on the head, you need to keep asking. And there are increasing numbers of lots of colleges where that degree of openness is around. And the other thing to do is go and pair up with or visit a college quite some way away, because clearly people don't talk easily to neighbours, and competitive colleges, but you could tell I'm really delighted, because one of the colleges that got outstanding this term we did quite a bit of work with, and they're probably 160 miles away from Exeter. That seemed to work really well. So that's the other one, is to go and talk to some other governors in another college you've heard about that's some way away. But I really would encourage you in doing this work, not because I'm trying to make, you know, make life awkward for my colleague principals, but I believe the sector has been given this opportunity of increased freedom, really, which I'm enjoying thoroughly after 20 years as a principal. This is the most autonomy I've had, really. This is better than almost it's like the early FEFC days, Dennis. But with more controls in it now, so it's much more mature now than it was then. And to do that, governors need to be really, really good. And I would say keep challenging if you're not sure. You've got to be robust. You can do that in a polite way. You don't have to be unpleasant about it. But don't be fobbed off with there's too much data, or it's all too complicated, or you'll never understand it.
Can I just, Nicole asked a question about data in terms of local economic needs and making sure that the college meets those. I'm tempted to say local enterprise partnership. Does that greet everybody say, oh yes, we're very much involved with our LEP, or does it lead a groan of, no, we're not? John, do you want to come in on that or another topic? Can we have the microphone? Oh, is it Mike here? Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind waiting, John, for this lady here then? Right.
Oh, hi. Caroline Jolliffe from Bromley College. Just I'd like to make 2 points. One is that I'm chair of Quality and Standards and vice chair. And on our quality and standards, we have over time come to a point where we've got data that we are happy with, factual data. We do have percentages and things like that, but we like the actual numbers, and we like to see the trends, and we like to compare it to the national standards. So we do things like that on all the normal things that you would expect. We also look at performance management. We also look at areas where things are going well and going badly, and we look at why we're involved in the curriculum we're involved in. As chair of the group, I get involved in the planning events that go on with the staff at the college. Now, I can do that because I'm now retired. I know it's not so easy for people who are working. So at the moment, we've got a Quality and Standards Committee, and that's the way we're going to keep it. But we're going to review it again this year, as we always do. And it may be that we will try and broaden that out to the board. The second point I wanted to make is that we were recently inspected. We're a merged college. We merged recently. And unusually, I understand, for merged colleges, our success rates went up. And we came away with a good rating from Ofsted. I just wanted to point out about what the governors went through. We had a grilling. It wasn't a difficult grilling because we knew our stuff, but there was a great focus on the quality standards, performance management side of things. We had about 8 or 9 people there, including the chairs of our committees and other members, and everyone contributed. But as the chair of the quality and standards, I did get picked on quite a bit. But I'm quite awkward myself, so I was fine with that. They then also interviewed the chair of governors separately. I think we were about an hour or so, just the once, but that was what we went through. So it may not be quite as straightforward as the Exeter experience appeared to be. You do need to know what you're talking about, and that means you need to be aware of current trends as well. One of the important things we do as part of our overall committee meetings, board meetings, is that we have regular updates on trends and what's happening in education, how that impacts on what we're going to do. And it's important for us to understand that because that sort of thing came up as well. The other thing we do we don't have residentials, but we do have Way Day, is that we always look back and forward, and we're very actively involved in our self-assessment and where we're going. Thank you.
I've got the gentleman at the back been waiting some time. Do you want to do that, then I'll come back to you.
Thanks so much. John Greystone from Colleges Wales. My board is actually made up of college principals and chairs, and you can't pull any wool over their eyes at all. It's tough. But my question really was, sorry, it's going back to data, and I'd be interested to hear the responses of governors. Is one of the questions how you actually understand the data, and it's a question of benchmarks. And I was going to ask Richard this question. Because if you have, say, a figure saying you've got 90% success rate in X, Y, and Z, what does that actually mean? Is that good or bad? It is good if the rest of the sector is 50%. You're not doing very well if everyone else is 100%. So really the question is, do you benchmark yourselves against similar colleges of similar size, say, which in your case, tertiary colleges, 30 million turnover? Do sixth form colleges benchmark themselves against other sixth form colleges? Or do you aim for the best top 10 colleges in the country? So it's really actually trying to make sense of the data for governors. To whom do you compare it? So it actually becomes a realistic set of figures. And I think governors obviously can then drive that forward and understand much better what the data is actually saying. So that was, sorry, going back to data again, Richard.
The benchmarking thing, yeah, thank you. Lady down here, back on the table we were before, and, oh, sorry. You're waiting some time, have you? I'm sorry, out of my eye line. I'll come back to you.
My name's Margaret Robb. I'm a governor at Carlisle College. I have a very simple recommendation that you have a social scientist as one of your governors, and that will sort a lot of your problems. I mean, what I've noticed is that a lot of colleges will have a finance person or they'll have an auditor, and I can recommend strongly social scientists. But another thing I would say is that I was for 25 years working in HE in this country, and I've only now moved to FE 2 years ago. And I'm very interested in how there is, I won't say a lack of collaboration, but there doesn't seem to be as much of a tie between the two. And I would be interested, and this is a completely new topic, so maybe people will catch me over lunch, in why that is and what could be done.
Lack of collaboration between further education and higher education.
And higher education. And I think Bill Lucas talked about that in talking about pedagogy. And he said at one point there was PhD students at one end and the people making, I think it was couches, furniture at the other end. And I think there could be a lot more tie-in.
Lady here. Perhaps I should reveal I'm a governor of a university.
Thank you. I'm Claire Corrigan from Oldham Sixth Form College, and I'm teaching governor. I'm very nervous. It was just a point you raised yourself. We've just currently been through the Ofsted inspection, and I found myself as a teaching governor in an interview. And one of the things they were very keen on the statistics and the data, but they were more interested in how governors were understanding learners. And the sixth form where I am now, governors are now doing assemblies with learners, because a lot of the governors are business people, and they're raising aspiration for learners to achieve, giving them advice. And I think the governors can play a bigger role really with the learners and get a lot of vital information really from them.
Directly. Yeah. Thank you. Richard, you want
if I start with John's question, we do benchmark. The governors do use benchmarks a lot. GFE for FE, and we use sixth form college benchmarks for our A-level provision. It's a good thing to benchmark. I think it helps governors. When you granulate, though, when you really drill down, you get all these quirky things, don't you? Like, so particularly in the vocation area, you get some qualification with 95% success rates nationally and others with 45%. So you have to be a little bit careful, I think, in contextualising what you're doing, but I think the governors do find it helpful, and our data's always presented equality and standards, I think, always now with those two benchmarks, all the A-levels against sixth form college and all the rest of our work against GFE. So I think people do find that helpful. I have a daughter studying social science at university, so thanks for the career tip. We will talk a little bit in the Commission report about collaboration between FE and HE. I think I'm probably sworn to secret. You're not supposed to talk about these things until they're published. We've had 2 academics from the Institute of Education on the Commission. We have talked about pedagogy, and one of our aims will be to raise the status and quality and aspirations of vocational teaching and learning. So I'm sure I'm not even supposed to say that really, because there are things like press releases and all of that stuff. But that's a week on Monday, and I hope that will contribute to the national debate. That is the first commission of this kind, I think, that we've ever had, and I've really enjoyed being part of it. We've held our meetings right throughout the country in some most fantastic settings, places like Rolls-Royce in Derby, British Aerospace, 1 or 2 outstanding colleges. So it's been really the Army Training Centre, really some fantastic settings. And that's been a collaboration, I think, between 3 groups, industry, FE and HE. And I think that's maybe uniquely FE. I think our relationship with industry should be even stronger than HE has. So I think it's a 3-way partnership between business and industry, FE and HE, and hopefully the Commission will encourage that. I'd just agree, it was really interesting to hear people's experience in inspection. It sounds really good if people share that, and given the framework only started in September, the more we share that through Richard's library and other ways, the more people will become confident and more familiar with the approach. The sector's incredibly responsive. I mean, this framework only began last year. My guess is that within a couple of years, a lot of colleges will have mastered this or gone a long way to doing so. It's always tricky the first 18 months of any new framework because you're trying to change tack a little bit in quite a lot of colleges. It tells me this term we've had 2 already outstandings. I've got a funny feeling we'll have 1 or 2 more before the summer, and I think next year you'll see more again, which is good for the sector. And of course it's good for Ofsted, because if you say things aren't very good and then they improve.
I might just ask for a straw poll. We've got a workshop session after lunch and then a plenary session which is on governance and the new Common Inspection Framework from a senior HMI talking about that. There's a sense that suddenly college boards are saying, teaching and learning, it's very important. Ofsted tells us. Can we just have a quick show of hands? Who felt that teaching and learning was a prime focus for the boards before the new Common Inspection Framework? Good, yeah. So we're not doing it just because Ofsted tell us. And that is fundamental, isn't it? You know, part of the board's responsibility has always been the educational character. What we do, what is the quality of what we do, are students getting a good experience? If we weren't thinking about that, then we were failing in one of our fundamental duties. Right, we've got time for a few more questions before we stop. Gentleman here has been waiting to come in as well. Lady there.
In the context of teaching and learning, the economic situation, the financial situation of FE is changing quite remarkably from, well, it's changing all the time, but particularly sort of this year, September onwards. And that will have implications in relation to learning and teaching and the need to ensure that your requirements are still able to be met. One of the areas where I think it's difficult for a governor is to keep abreast of these changes and the impact of these changes and to be able to meaningfully comment on the implication locally and the best way to respond locally. Have you any advice in relation to that?
A well-informed principal.
Yeah. We'll have to get one of those in.
No, it's an important issue, isn't it? Making sure you're up to date with the changing context. Asher said, you know, a lot coming at us all the time. We need to make sure we're aware of it and moving with it and responding to it.
Helen Flynn, I'm from Craven College and I'm the chair of the Curriculum Quality and Standards Committee there. No one's talked yet much about employability, and it strikes me that colleges have a different kind of set of accountability to particularly schools because of the employability issue. I just wanted to see if there are any reflections on that, if that can be used, you know, how we get data on that, how important it is, particularly for accountability purposes, and also whether there can be more of a focus on how we generate that, on the quality of partnerships, particularly with local employers, to enhance the curriculum.
This employability theme, and I think the Alison Wolfe report, Wiltshire's reports, some of the things that Gove is saying, is almost saying vocational education is not provided. You know, we've been getting qualifications, but not necessarily the right ones. This whole question, I think, of the purpose of what we do with students is critical, isn't it? Before I answer Richard, over breakfast I was talking to a consultant surgeon who was staying here from Newcastle, and we chatted about various things, but he used the phrase human factors. He said, as surgeons, we're realizing more and more that it's the human factors that make success or failure in the operating theatre and in recovery. I said, we often call those soft skills. He said, if you're a surgeon, he said, you don't want to know about soft skills, it's only hard skills. Richard.
Just coming back to 2 or 3 questions. The keeping up to date is a challenge. Hopefully the board meetings and other events, the principal and others help. In our region, there's a pretty good system of governor development training where governors go out and meet governors from other colleges and do that, which is helpful. There is a lot going on and it is very busy. And as I said earlier, it's a team of specialists as well as generalists. So I don't think the whole board should try and be up to speed with everything that's going on in the FE sector. I've certainly given up doing that in my management team, because if I can't keep up with all the detail, I mean, I work with a team, and I think you as a board need to. So you need to, whilst you clearly need a general understanding, you cannot all be up to date with all the developments that are going on the FE system individually, but hopefully as a group you are, and various forms of pairing and so on might help that. I agree with everything that's said about employability. It's difficult to measure. We probably do what you do. So we ask students before they leave, we ask for their destinations. We do some random telephone surveys after they've left for so long. It's desperately difficult to track. I know a lot of people would like to measure us on it, but just find it really difficult. In terms of employer involvement, it's really key. I know the Commission will say a lot about this. I think both through not just the main board, through curriculum advisory boards and others, there needs to be active employer involvement in the college, and partnerships with employers are really, really key. At a more general level, the UK system stands out, doesn't it, really, for being too qualification driven. Too many qualifications, too much measurement of it. And we all go around talking about whether students get qualifications, and my governors would say we don't talk enough about all the other things that the college gives to our learners as well as qualifications. One would like to think that the pendulum on that might start to begin to move back a bit, because when you go abroad, we just stand out as the most qualifications obsessed nation in this area, and it would be nice to see us move more to where qualifications made up 2/3, 3/4, 80%, a chunk of the teaching and learning, and then there was another chunk that could be tailored to the requirements of your area, and the needs in Hertfordshire or Oldham will be different to Exeter or Carlisle, and it would be nice if there was a little room for colleges and teachers and students to tailor it a bit more. This sort of total centralist control of qualifications and funding is not a really helpful way to move forward, and I just hope that, and I know lots of people are making this case, that we begin to see, that's one of the freedoms we begin to see. I think you're going to close now, so I'm just going to say thank you very much for all your questions, and it's been great actually this morning. Thank you very much.
Before you get up and leave, I was going to thank Richard. Thank you. Can I, on your behalf, thank Richard very much for the input today. We have copies of the slides which Richard used in the earlier presentation, which I'll put on the table here, so if you want to take a printed copy, they're there for you. And in your packs, you'll find an LSIS report, some of you may have seen already, came out in the autumn, Challenges for FE College Governance. A lot of the themes we've been talking about in this session today are picked up in there, and pointing out that these are some of the issues that we don't have all the answers. We're still exploring the best way to do things. Thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the conference.